Dennis, hello.
Hello.
You may begin.
Oh, me? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to Sprint 123 review, the sprint ending October 28th. Next slide, please. So I'll go over the statistics. Harpreet will give us some information on the UI. Adam will do providers. Joe on the platform. Martin will give us API updates. Mike will tell us about QE, and then we'll have a summary. Next slide, please. So good trend here. The number of PRs opened went up this sprint a bit, and the numbers closed and still open and going down. So we're on a good trend. Next slide, please. So we had a pretty even split between enhancements and bugs, and test had a lot of work this past sprint. We're going to take a look at this slide going forward because, excuse me, a lot of PRs have multiple labels, and so the multiple counts. So we may change this this slide for the next sprint. We'll see. Next slide, please. And there seems to be something with the data for this overall report. We're taking a look at it, like in particular, I think UI Classic, number of other issues. I know the VMware line had some things we weren't sure about. So we're taking a look at what the issue is with the numbers, and then just in general, is there a better way to show this data going forward? Next slide, please. And off to Harpreet.
Total 32 PRs merged across the UI repos. Out of that, there were 3 enhancements, 17 bug fixes, and so on. For enhancements during this sprint, Red Hat Dropbox support to upload log files was removed, and that has been replaced with Red Hat support tool. There are other things that are currently being worked on and should be merged in next sprint or so. And for the bugs, if a user is part of multiple groups, when trying to switch the group, user was getting logged out of the UI, so a fix was made in that area. A fix was made on generic object type custom button edit screen. When trying to edit custom button there, the form was not loading the value for the request field, which is a required field, so that was forcing user to re-enter that again. A fix was made to not display 2 back buttons on policy simulation screen. And on the compare screen, user could unselect all the checkboxes on the left and could press apply button, but doing that was not changing contents on the screen. So a fix was made to disable the apply button to force user to at least select one section to load compare results. And a double render error was fixed when trying to perform certain actions on host aggregates to cloud provider relationship. A fix was made to prevent an error pop up on screen when pressing a delete button for custom buttons or custom button groups from the generic objects area. And toolbars were converted to React during last sprint. That introduced few issues, so those were addressed. There were some issues with toolbar groups not getting closed properly, so that was fixed. And change in this PR also supports use of keyboard in the dropdowns. Another fix was made in toolbars to remove empty groups, and some other exceptions were fixed as well. And that's all I have for the UI. Over to Adam.
Thanks, Harpreet. On the Amazon side, Alex Z completed a long-running set of work which upgrades us to the V3 AWS SDK. So this was released a while ago, but it was a pretty significant change to the structure of the gem, so it took us a while to actually get moved over to it. Specifically, it split up essentially one monolith gem that had all the APIs under it into individual sub-gems, and so it took a while to figure out what services we needed to require in different places, but overall it should let us reduce the overall memory usage because we're not loading 1 mega gem when we only really use 3 or 4 services out of it. So that was a really, really nice enhancement to get in. OpenStack fixed some issues with the event collection with the Panko service. If you were using all tenants, there's a problem with the V2 version of Keystone where it rejected all tenants and didn't work properly. So now that they had a fix for that. They also fixed an issue with AMQP events. So even though AMQP is deprecated, there were some problems where customers were still using it with multiple EMSs. So we were using the queue name based on the EMS name, but if you have multiple EMSs, they had different EMS IDs, and so there were some collisions, and so we just included the EMS ID into the queue name to fix that collision. Next slide. So they, over a couple of sprints ago, only allowed graph refresh as the refresh option. So, reducing some of the options that customers can tweak and also improving the performance. So now that that's there, we deleted all the old refresh code, which was a lot of code. Most of that's honestly VCRs. They had specific VCRs for the different refresh modes, but there was still a lot of actual code that was able to be deleted. So that was really great. Roberto also fixed an issue where there was a network API call being done during the specs, and it was failing due to a timeout because it couldn't hit what it was trying to hit, and then continued on with the fallback, so it looked like everything was working, but it was actually hitting timeouts and then falling back to other code, so it was slowing it down pretty significantly. So stubbed that API call out, so now it's much faster, which is great. I duplicated the OpenStack section, so just ignore that. Core. Let's see, Keenan made a nice change to schedule metrics collection per EMS instead of per zone. This is going to be enabling future performance enhancements which relate to grouping targets by EMS, where currently we just blindly collect one target at a time, so it doesn't really matter what EMS the target is from. But if we want to group targets, we need to be asking a single EMS for a group of targets, and so this is going to let us in future sprints make those performance enhancements. And I made a change to allow plugins to bring their own reports. This is part of our continuing work on making core more pluggable. And so anything that's seeded right now is able to be brought from either core or from a plugin. So we finished up all the seedable things. They did scan profiles in the last sprint and reports with the last one this sprint. And that's it for providers. Over to Joe.
Thank you, Adam. Had to find my unmute button. Sorry about that. 39 PRs were merged across the platform space this print, many of which were updates made by Joe R to upgrade our Ruby testing, but I'll get to that in a sec. Starting with enhancements, Joe R and Dan contributed gem version updates for Puma, sysfile system, and config gems. Keenan contributed a couple of enhancements that will allow Active Record to construct the AREL, or I'm not sure how to pronounce that, I'm just guessing, AREL, for virtual total attributes to support has many with the through parameter, and another performance enhancement to add indices to various tables. Dan contributed an enhancement to comply with Ruby best practices, which dictate if method missing is implemented in a class, the response to missing query method should also be implemented. Libor made an enhancement that will allow performance reports to be generated for a specific date range. Nick C contributed an enhancement to use PostgreSQL 10 since we no longer need PG logical as we're using the built-in logical replication. Nick C also made an enhancement to Linux admin by adding an option to the start method, allowing the service to also be enabled in a single stop call. For bugs, Yuri fixed one where the report data view table sorting wasn't properly working. Jar addressed a bug where constantizing errors were being logged. And Brandon addressed a bug reported against the appliance console related to setting date and time. The solution was truly brilliant and will make Joe R giddy because he simply deleted the functionality from the appliance console. The old doctor, if this hurts. This hurts. Well, stop doing that. Okay, kidding aside, setting date and time can be done in the cockpit UI now, so we don't need to support it in the appliance console. Nick L fixed a bug where an undefined method was being logged during scheduled manifest backups. Next slide, please. For technical debt, Libor addressed some technical debt by completely removing the MIQ expressions method getCallType, and he removed parsed field or tag from the MIQ expressions operands to Ruby values. And Yuri added a migration to remove the no longer used Rails server setting from the ManageIQ schema. Oleg contributed a refactoring PR to use the faster enumerable reverse each method over the each loop. And Keenan did some refactoring to avoid swamping the appliance running all tasks at startup. And Dan contributed some refactoring to improve some spec tests. And the last slide, please. Next slide, please. There we go. And for Ruby on Rails upgrade, Nixie made a couple of PRs to update the containers to the newer Ruby. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the call, Jor had done quite a bit of work to upgrade the Rubies we test with to the latest 2.5 and 2.6. And even though it's beyond the scope of this slide, I also included the PRs for this work that he had done for the providers, just to get a feel for how extensive all this work was. And that's it for the platform space. On to the API. And Martin, take it away.
Okay, so we had two groups of enhancements in this sprint. The first one is the added support for tagging for cloud tenants and cloud volumes. Work was started by Brett Logan, and I just finished it. So here you can see an example of getting the tags under cloud tenants. Next slide. So this is the other group where Daniel Berger added zones and regions editing. Again, here is a simple example where you can see that we are using the edit action and supplying the resource, and we are changing the description. A bit more work was done, some hardening work, and some improvements to logging by Martin H. That's all from the API. Next slide, please.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So we had a ton of content and contributions to integration tests this sprint. We have a new first level reviewer, Ganesh Shubale from Pune team. We have tagged 17.61.0 release, but have not merged to downstream stable as we were unable to do our usual weekend release candidate testing. Overall, we had 70 PRs contributed, with 19 automating existing manual test coverage, 14 adding new test coverage, 9 PRs fixing test coverage, and 11 PRs that were enhancements either to the test framework or to test fixtures. We had a major reorganization of our Sprout tasks by Yevgen Polsky, who organized our tasks into various classes depending on what type of task they were, and then defined high, medium, and low priority queues to manage those tasks. This is for the Sprout tool that's available in. Next slide. So I won't necessarily read through every one of these lines. This is not even all of the PRs that were significant test contributions this sprint. We had a ton of automation for automate domain from Ganesh Shubale, including email content for provisioning requests that exceeded quota, and for get automate domain import. We had automation from Parthvi for filtering of the report content, and for Intel report folder and subfolder CRUD, and tests for report schedules with user emails. Niaz automated importing service dialogues and moved flash message assertions from the framework and from the model into the test, a great test enhancement. Satyet contributed Ansible service tests for BZ coverage. Nandini contributed tests for tenant testing EMS group CRUD as a tenant admin user, and added manual coverage for EMS user CRUD as a tenant admin. John Dupuy updated our breadcrumb and redirection tests for services with generic objects. Angelina added tests for reverting snapshots on active VMs, and the fact that that is not allowed. Yaroslav added tests for stack provisioning and retirement, and contributed a bunch of fixes for some of those existing tests. Matos contributed a test for EC2 provider CRUD using STS CRUD or credentials with role assumption. And then Justin Watts has been updating our rel updates markers for our tests to improve our coverage for interop testing. And PJ Richardson enhanced our grid, tile, and list page reading by allowing to slice elements on that page early in the process so that we don't have to read all of them. And that is it for QE. Thanks.
And that concludes the Sprint 123 review. The next Sprint review will be November 13th for Sprint 124. See you all then.
Questions? Any questions, anybody? Comments?
Almost got away with it.
Old jokes? No? We're good?
No comment.
Old jokes are the only jokes Greg has.
That's right.
That's true. That's
And I
true.
used them up.
All
already.
right. I'll see you folks in a couple of weeks then.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.